What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys are doing well out there. Happy Saturday. This is our new Saturday stock market recap show where we go over what has happened in the stock market. We'll run down a little bit of the news for the week. Today, we're going to talk about EV stocks, crypto, gold, and we'll talk about the earnings that are upcoming next week. Let's kick things off with the S&P 500, end of the week at a 1.6% gain. Now, this was a shortened trading week, but what I want to show you just broadly here really quickly is here's like a max chart going back to kind of the March lows that we made last year. Obviously, when the virus kind of, was taking hold of everything, the stock market sold off, made a bottom sometime in, about the middle of March, end of March, and it has been on rally mode ever since then. And so, yes, we've had some pullbacks, we've had some dips, and we've had people post all kinds of videos and make all kinds of news stories about how the market is crashing. But take a look at this chart. Always take a step back when things are happening in the stock market and take a broader view, get up in a helicopter and look down, and you see that, boy, this trend is up on the S&P 500. Now, the QQQ, which is the NASDAQ, that had a better week. Obviously, we've seen a little bit deeper pullback in this one. When we get to the chart, we'll see that. But for the last 5 trading days, this one is up about 4%. When we take a look at the QQQs, again, I zoomed it out here, okay? What I wanted to show you was, are we in did the uptrend break in the Qs? I'm sure you've maybe seen some technical analysis here on YouTube and maybe other places where technically, absolutely, we were in an uptrend right here with the Qs, and it gapped and broke down. I'm on a weekly view here, and so it's consolidated a little bit from a candle perspective, but we broke our uptrend here, and a lot of people are saying, hey, this is the end of the trend. This is this is it. This is the crash, blah, blah, blah. Well, look, I zoom this chart out. This goes back into 2018. So this is almost like a 3-year view here. There's been numerous times where the NASDAQ has broken trend and dropped down. And again, gone on a nice little rally, broke trend, dropped down. Same thing over and over and over again. Okay, markets don't just go straight up, and for the most part, don't come all the way down, especially when we're talking about a broad market, a big basket of stocks. So from what I see here, no need to panic. Can we consolidate in this area? Can this thing come down a little bit further? Absolutely. Can it continue this uptrend and start a new one? I would actually probably bet on that. So that's the broad markets. We'll see what happens heading into next week. Now, in terms of news, a little bit light on the news this week. In terms of the stock market, get only 4 trading days. Earnings are kind of coming up, so companies are kind of going into that, not necessarily like a quiet period, but they might save a little bit for the earnings and things like that. So we've got a bunch of earnings heading into the next 2 or 3 weeks now, including all the major tech stocks. Now, Cathie Wood, obviously the CEO, the founder of ARK Invest, one of some of the most successful actively managed ETFs in the stock market, launched a new one. This one was ARKX. This one was based on space exploration. I posted a video about this on our channel. I'll put it up in maybe one of the little cards up above there. Now, the stock didn't do a whole lot, or the ETF didn't do a whole lot this week. It went from about 20 up to about 21. When you look at the holdings in this one, quite frankly, it's not a lot to get excited about. Here's what I think is going on with this one, though. I think what Cathie Wood is doing is she has started this ETF probably a little early, okay, because she wants to get in capital, get investors, get some money flowing, and then when SpaceX potentially goes public, there's lots of other space stocks that are actually private now that I think are a lot more exciting than the public ones. And I think she's just getting this ETF kind of going right now in order to raise capital, raise awareness, and basically be, hit the ground running when those more major space stocks go public. So could you jump in here and be early to the party? I think you could. Could you wait a little while, kind of monitor this one? I think that probably would be the strategy that I would take. Now, the other little bit of news that I thought was interesting is social media stocks trim gains with former President Trump moving forward on new platforms. So here's my thoughts on this. So obviously the former president is banned from pretty much all the major platforms. They took that action, as I'm sure you are all aware. And here's just my thoughts on this. Okay, to start a social media platform, you need marketing. And I think we can assume that Donald Trump will have that nailed. I think he's a pretty good marketer. And I think just him launching his own social media site would get a lot of attention, not only from the news networks, but on the social media networks themselves. People would discuss this. But here's the thing that I think is probably the trickiest portion of this whole thing is what servers is Donald Trump going to be able to put this new social media platform on? We saw another social media platform called Parler, which I think was on AWS and it got kicked off. And I think it might be back up. I'm not 100% sure. But here's the thing. Google controls a lot of servers. Microsoft controls a lot of servers. And we know Amazon controls a lot of the web servers out there that run things like Twitter and Snapchat and YouTube and all these things. Okay, obviously none of those platforms are going to allow Donald Trump to set up his social media site on there. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge is actually the tech piece of this is going to be his biggest challenge if he actually pulls this off. I think starting a social media site, getting people to sign up, getting people to pay attention to it wouldn't be that hard considering he's banned off of all the other sites. If he starts tweeting or whatever they call it on his own social platform, well, guess what? That's going to be disseminated across all the major news networks and across Facebook and Twitter and wherever else people discuss these types of things. So I think he's got that part nailed. I think it's going to be tricky trying to find a tech company that will want to host these types of things. We'll see if he's able to get past that hurdle. That will be interesting to follow. Now, moving on to electric vehicle stocks, EV stocks, obviously some of the hottest stocks in the market, although we've seen them pull back a little bit. I think to take a broader view of this is copper demand from the auto industry is expected to double as EVs ramp up. Obviously, Tesla's got a big lead in the EV space, and every car maker from Audi to Ford to GM to Mercedes has saying that, oh, we're going to have an EV, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And you look at their car lineup and it's still mainly combustion engines. So eventually though, we assume that it'll probably, really pick up. And obviously copper is one of the key ingredients when you're making electric vehicles, among other things. So we'll see. Sometimes the best investments aren't necessarily the ones directly into the market that you're looking at. Sometimes it's the companies or kind of the commodities on the side. So I'd keep an eye on copper. Now, Tesla and Toyota are reportedly considering an SUV partnership. This one's interesting. Thought this was, this could create more of a trend, okay? Because EVs require batteries, require marketing, require, lots of different things in order for them to be successful. Well, a company like Tesla and Toyota could combine some of their stuff. Toyota's probably got a little bit better distribution and got more brands and more cars on the road and more service stations. And Tesla's got the battery technology and a nice brand and things like that. So them partnering up could be interesting. And it'll be interesting to see what it does to Tesla's valuation, because a lot of Tesla's valuation is based on rapid growth. And if they start partnering with companies, what will the margins look like there? And what will people's opinion of the Tesla brand be at that point? So we'll see what Tesla decides to do here. Now, electric vehicles broadly rally. We'll take a look at one. I'm going to take a look at NIO here, at least from a technical perspective. We'll take a look at that one. I get a lot of questions about NIO here on the channel. We also cover Tesla basically on a weekly basis on our Friday show. So I don't feel like we necessarily need to do that here today, but we will take a look at NIO here in just a minute. But I wanted to talk about this broadly is electric vehicle stocks rally after President Biden proposed a massive investment in the EV market. I mean, he proposed $175 billion investment in the EV market. That's to help factories. It's really to be like almost like subsidies for these EV companies. Now, how are they going to pay for this? this? I don't know, probably printing money. They talked about a corporate tax hike. So that will be interesting. Okay, you might be able to get this EV investment, and that might prop up some parts of the market, some parts of the EV market. But if they are able to pay for this by increasing the corporate tax, I think they want to go back to where it was with under the Obama administration, the Biden administration. That might be a good way to put it. So we'll see. It might cancel out any kind of benefit there. So I'd really monitor this closely. Again, politicians say a lot of things, and they come out with requests and demands. And we all know, watching this, that most of that doesn't necessarily end up happening. It tends to be just a piece of it. So what piece of this proposal will end up becoming law and become part of become part of what the United States plan in the EV market ends up being. So we'll see what happens, but anything that involves a corporate tax hike could take away from any kind of benefit that you might see from this type of investment. Now, XPeng, ticker symbol XPEV, claims that they record the longest autonomous drive. That is with a mass production vehicle. They drove this thing quite a ways. Again, these are claims that these companies make, not necessarily something that's going to drive the stock one way or another. But I thought this was interesting, and it could pave the way for XPeng to continue to have a very strong performance. Now, speaking of performance, we'll take a look at NIO. This one has been locked up in a downtrend, okay? Like Tesla, kind of made a high up here at about 65, and then boom, had a massive, multi-week sell-off. Okay, this thing went from 65 all the way. I mean, it shaved off like 50% off the stock price. This thing bottomed out down here at about $32 per share, almost a clean 50% downtrend on this one. Now, we bounced up to about 45, came back down here to 33, and we bounced up here into about the $40 range. Now, here's what I see that could potentially happen here. We could sideways consolidate here with this one, okay? Anywhere between this 34 to 38 is the bottom end of what I'm seeing of a range here, and we could peak up to the 44 to 48 range. Now, if you want to trade this one, certainly could be some setups down here. I think down here in this 34 to 38 range, anywhere in this box, buyers have stepped in here. You also have this moving average approaching up here. That both of these things should actually create a level, like a bed of support underneath this stock. But as we've seen here, the sellers start stepping in right at around the $44 to $46 range. This stock has not been able to get above that for about a month now. So if it is able to pop up above that, you'd have some sellers probably here at 48, but it could resume the uptrend. Obviously, a lot of this has to do with the EV market in general, but we also have the chip shortage, which is really delaying the production of a lot of cars, not only from NIO, but from Tesla to Ford to GM. And that is likely to continue, I would guess, probably into the summertime. And so how these companies kind of manage that and explain that to investors, and not only that, but control cost as well, will be critical. Obviously, when NIO reports earnings, we'll have that covered here on the channel. Now, moving into the cryptocurrencies, boy, they have been on fire. Goldman Sachs is close to offering Bitcoin and other digital assets to its wealth management clients. We've seen this is just a trend from all the major banks. Obviously, companies as well, like Tesla and Square, have started to use Bitcoin more and more like cash, more and more like an investment, rather than something on the side that only, tech geeks or things like that tend to pay attention to. Now, from a technical perspective, I get asked about Bitcoin a lot. I got friends that are jumping into this market and they're asking me about Bitcoin. They know I've been in Bitcoin for a very long time. I think I first started buying Bitcoin, first was aware of it at about $3 a Bitcoin. Sure wish I would have bought quite a few of them at that time. Now, I didn't do it then, but I did start buying, I think, right in that $200 range. Obviously, wish I would have bought even more at that time. I've never sold any Bitcoin. I've only bought it. And so, but from a technical perspective, look, this one made all-time highs up here at about 60,000, almost right on the number. And that's about where we're at right now. I mean, we're hundreds of dollars away from that. And when it's at 59,000, we're talking about fractions of a percentage here. So what happens? This is one I'm monitoring very closely. What happens to Bitcoin when it reaches 60,000? Two options and two very likely options is you get a big green candle up above 60,000. All of a sudden, CNBC and all the news articles and the YouTube videos will come out. All new all-time high in Bitcoin. Get in. It's going to 100,000. It's going to 200,000. And that's certainly possible when you zoom this chart out. Good Lord, we can't even get this uptrend on the screen. That is how steep this thing has gone up. And so what I'm seeing, that's really what I'm monitoring here is does it pop up above 60,000? You can momentum trade that up to a certain degree. Then this 60,000 level will be support or will act as some kind of support. Now, the other option, we're seeing these candles really flatten out here. That means, buyers are kind of drying up and sellers are stepping in to a certain degree. Well, what could we have? Is we can have a pullback back into, logically, a big pullback would take us back down to about 48,000. In my opinion, that would create a buying opportunity for Bitcoin. It is something I add to, like maybe $100, $200 here or there. And so a pullback into this 48 range, 50 to 48, I think you can have wider ranges when we're talking about something that's $50,000. Yeah, anywhere in this range, pull back into that range would be, in my opinion, an intermediate buying opportunity, and it would keep us inside this sideways consolidation. Okay, now if you break 48 and you head lower, boy, this thing could probably go back down into the 30s, which again, in my opinion, would probably create more of a buying opportunity. But from the shorter term, this sideways consolidation actually looks pretty good to me with Bitcoin, and it wouldn't surprise me if we bounce around here between 50 and 60 for a while before it decides to go one way or another. And when you got big major institutions like this handing Bitcoin to their major big money wealthy clients that may have no exposure or very little exposure to Bitcoin, well, it certainly could drive it higher. Now, what was kind of the Bitcoin before Bitcoin? It was actually gold, and gold has slipped below $1,700 as Bitcoin takes aim at 60,000. Now, there's a lot of discussion out there that Bitcoin takes away from gold and maybe vice versa. I don't really think so. I just think when you come in here and take a look at GLD, which is kind of the proxy for gold, look, this thing just kind of trades on its own. And we were in a big time uptrend. Okay. Late last year, in the summer of last year, this thing went from about 158 all the way up to close to $200. Again, I'm using GLD, which is a popular ETF, kind of a proxy for gold. So that's why, when you see gold at 1,700, usually this is about 10% of that value. Roughly. Now, but since we made that top back here in August of 2020, it has been on a straight channel down. You see here, I drew these two red lines. We've just been channeling down here in gold, and until that trend decides to reverse itself, we even saw it try to reverse itself here right at the tail end of last year, and it keeps going down. Now, there's a lot of people that are anticipating like inflation to kind of step in, and obviously if inflation stepped in, you'd actually expect gold to go up, because typically when inflation steps in, you've got yields going up and inflation rising, and things like gold tends to go up. So we'll see. It's interesting that the market from an interest rate perspective is pricing in inflation, but when you come here and look at gold, they're not at all pricing in any inflation. So, I'm not sold that we're going to see a bunch of price inflation, at least maybe permanent price inflation. I think we will see temporary price inflation. Things like used cars have been going up. We've seen gasoline kind of tick up in price. Certainly home prices have inflated quite a bit. But will that be a permanent action? Will that be something that is permanent and last for maybe a year over year type situation where the Fed will have to come in and step in and raise interest rates, and something like gold skyrockets because inflation just kind of gets a little out of control or runs a little hotter than people expected. So we'll see. I am keeping a close eye on gold, not necessarily something I do consistently buy gold, not a very large amount of it, but I'm really keeping an eye on gold primarily for an inflation indicator because, again, interest rates are pricing in more inflation. The market is kind of trying to price in more inflation. They're anticipating it. But gold is signaling something completely different, almost like deflation. So we'll see what ends up happening. Now, finally, earnings upcoming next week. Obviously, this channel is built on earnings. We cover as many companies as we possibly can. We're heading into earnings week, and nothing makes me more excited than that. Quite frankly, I've got kids and things like that, so maybe I shouldn't exaggerate that much. But from the investor channel perspective, nothing gets me more excited than earnings. We've got Constellation Brands reporting 4.8, Levi Strauss 4.8, Delta Airlines 4.9. So we'll do a video, probably on Constellation Brands, probably Delta Airlines, Levi Strauss, not a very widely held company, but we'll keep an eye on that one as well. Guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. We'll be back again next Saturday with more news, more recaps, more talk probably about EV stocks, crypto, gold, and silver. If you got any suggestions for the show or the channel, feel free to leave them down below. Thanks for tuning in today. Good luck with your investments.